Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking about the guide exam. We are all so nervous. We are all so scared. And none of us really know what to expect. And so we decided to invite the one person in the world who knows the answer to all of our questions, Angie Atkinson from Gettysburg National Military Park. Welcome, Angie.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so everybody's freaking out online. You see the comments, you know, these outrageous claims like you're going to have to deliver your tour during the oral exam by hanging from a helicopter or something, and, you know, all these crazy challenges and things. But really, is it really as terrifying as people are thinking it is going to be?
No, but we could do that. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you should.
No. Yeah, that, you know, one should not think of it as a terrifying experience.
Okay.
I would say, you know, after talking to a number of guys that have been through it, it's one of fraternity, one of experience, camaraderie, and this is even from those that don't end up being licensed as guides. There is a sense of community by those individuals, but no, one should not fear the process. And, you know, we're going to chat about that. But yeah. I think it's, you know, if you understand the process, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. And really just a process to try and bring in the most qualified folks to be licensed guides.
Is it fair to say that the park actually wants to license guides, and so if you get beyond, say, the second step in the whole examination process, they're going to work with you to make sure that you get it. Not guaranteed, but they're going to do everything they can to help you and not just kind of say, you're on your own, we'll see you on your oral.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple components to that. I mean, it doesn't help us to only bring on 3 people.
Right.
You know, so yes, while the process is rigorous, and it needs to be, the ultimate goal, though, by going through all these different steps is that we give you as many tools as possible to succeed. Now, you know, I can't put all the information in your brain. You know, I can't, you know, stuff your brain with Harry Fonz July 2nd. But what we can do is we can instruct and we can guide, pun intended, and we can, you know, help you navigate some of these things. At the end of the day, it's your own effort. You know, the effort that you put forward has to meet our rubrics and objectives. But no, like, we want to see people become licensed. We want to be able to say, hey, here's the group of newly licensed guides, and be able to have a strong number of individuals to do that. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help the visiting public, more importantly, to only see 3 new faces within the guide force. Even the guides, I think, would like to see, you know, some
of course, sure.
They're pretty worn out this time of year, folks, after school season.
It'd be nice to have some more. Yeah,
I mean, we definitely want to get a good, solid number of folks, if we can.
So I don't know where this came from, but the impression that I had a few years ago, prior to, I guess, the way, I guess this comes from the old way of doing things, where it was just, as I understand it, written, oral, and that was it.
Yep.
That it, at least maybe my interpretation of it was that it was almost, no, I don't want to say adversarial, but it was like, it was more nerve-wracking by the time you got,
it's do or die.
Right. Okay. And so, and so you might get questions on your oral exam to trip you up or something like that, which maybe you would still do because you got to keep somebody on their toes. But now, between passing the oral and passing the written and doing the oral exam, there's a process to help you along.
Yes. So we go back many, many decades. And you're right, there was the written exam. And in fact, when guiding started, it was just the written exam. There was no oral exam. That would come in decades later.
Okay.
Implemented by some folks in the Park Service. And so for many years, that was kind of the formula: written exam, oral exam. And depending on the year, sometimes you could take your written exam, you might move forward to the oral exam, and it could be 5 years before you gave that oral exam.
Oh, really?
Depending on how many people passed and the situation at that time, the way they were doing things. So, that wasn't helping matters. But yeah, so now what we've tried to do is implement some of those intermediary steps and evaluative measures that for the Park Service, we can more thoroughly look at the candidates. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have a written exam, you're not talking to anybody. It's just your answers on a piece of paper. The only time you got to talk to that individual was during the oral exam, of which they're doing most of the talking. Mm-hmm. And it's a completely, contrived sort of conversation. So that was really important to kind of add in some of those elements so that we could see, the Park Service could see who was attempting to become a guide, but we could also help correct some of those things if they continue to, demonstrate the achievements for those different sessions or different components of the licensing process.
Well, let's start from the beginning, and then I'll ask you these questions because my questions are kind of jumping around right now. So let's go from the beginning. Start with what you would recommend people do to prep for the exam. I know there's some people that have come up with their own study techniques, and people who've passed the exam say, "No, you're doing too much in this and too much in that," and then that person gets mad or whatever. But really, what should people do? I mean, there's the reading list. Right. Right.
So, we've got a suggested reading list up on the website, up on Gettysburg National Military Parks website. And you're definitely going to want to start looking at that. It's not an end all be all. It's simply a suggestion of where to start. If you are taking a look at that and you're like, oh, I've read a bunch of these, you should probably then move on to the ones that you haven't. Okay. Or, start expanding on, well, what else is out there? So reading is important. Comprehension and letting that all sink in is important. The other component, though, is being on the field.
That was my next question.
So, and this is something that we were seeing with previous exams. A lot of people had book knowledge, which is outstanding. I mean, it means that you've spent the time to study these authors, their arguments, their theses and their content, but that also needs to be applied out on those 6,000 acres out there in the battlefield. And if you get out there and your assumption of Cemetery Ridge is that it's like the cliffs of Vicksburg. And, this is what the Confederates were assaulting against on July 3rd. Right. You are completely taken aback, and you're now trying to present a story which in your mind you've set. But is not the case in reality. And, we hear it all the time, folks that are, when I was out on the field doing programs or even at the information desk, people are shocked that Cemetery Ridge is not
this huge,
the hulking, exactly. And so that field knowledge, understanding where things are in relation. So when Sickles moves out, what was he looking at? Mm-hmm. What was that difference in elevation between, what is now the Peach Orchard versus his position back on Cemetery Ridge? Understanding the distance, what else you can see from these vantage points. Understanding how you can see them at different times of year. How you can see them with different crops that are in rotation. Maybe not accurate to 1863, but there was an era where we had corn 7 stories tall. That makes for interesting tours. So you have to blend all of you have to translate what is being written on these pages and, then to what you see on the field, and you're synthesizing all of that to come up with a complete picture.
Also, I think it helps to be able to know where things are in relation to others. There's a lot of things you can see. So, for example, there's that little path that goes behind the peace light, and there's that boulder on the top of the hill there. And you can go out there and you can see from one end to the other end of the Union positions on day one. But you can also foreshadow, if you have the time to do this on your tour, down and show everybody where a little round top is. You can show them the water tower on Cemetery Hill. You can show them Benner's Hill. And then when you get to another spot where you can see all these things, you can point them out too to help orient everybody as you go along. So, I mean, you have to be able to navigate the park. You do.
And really that is the whole crux, in a sense, of being licensed.
Yeah.
You're not in a classroom presenting lecture style information,
right?
Where you can have your notes and, thorough visuals. You are out on the field. You are there with the changing situation as it may be. The clouds roll in from the west and you can no longer see the peace light. The rain's coming, but now you can't provide that. You have to be able to adapt and work around that. You can stand on Cemetery Hill in the National Cemetery, and depending on the day, you can see the peace light, if the trees are cooperating and such. So, and in the reverse, if you were planning on using that, but now you can't see it, you have to be able to adapt. So understanding what happens on the field in all those different conditions is important. Same thing when, our guys throw out the random orange cones and, we've got stuff blocked off. You've got to be able to adapt and understand how the field works in order to be able to come up with that.
That's a great point, because there are times where roads are closed. Like in the winter with the snow, sometimes the roads will be closed, but you can still go through the park, just not on certain roads.
Correct.
And so you got to be able to know what to do. And you mentioned the weather coming in from the west. From my experience, I've been around guides a lot. And so I talked to a lot of them. And when I was operating the bike tours, weather is obviously very important to us. So you learn to pay attention to it, and you learn what the patterns are like. Wouldn't need to look at a forecast, and I could tell you if those dark purple rain clouds are actually going to hit where we are, or if they're going to go past us, just by watching them for a minute or two. And, 8 times out of 10, I'd be right. And so, and I talked to a lot of guides who have developed that same ability because they're just out there all the time, and you depend on the weather sometimes.
Oh yeah, do we have enough time to get across Pickett's Charge before that stuff hits?
We get dumped on.
Exactly. We've been out there plenty of times.
So okay, book learning.
Yep.
Very obviously very important. Mm-hmm. And then being out on the battlefield.
Field study.
You got to get out there. Now, are you aware of someone who's rarely or never visited the battlefield who passed the written and was able to go all the way?
Am I aware?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Has it happened? I'm sure.
It had to have, right?
I mean, it had to have happened. I can tell you, though, this. It does become evident as you move through the tiers, that we'll chat about. It becomes evident when someone is from the West Coast or the Midwest, and they're kind of coming in to try to do this process. And when you're out on the field and you can see the unfamiliarity kind of really bubble up.
They're trying to get their bearings and show it.
They've driven around 25 times this morning to try and understand exactly where something is, but it's still not, it's not like intrinsic. Like they don't just know, where if you've been doing that field study, you might be rusty, but it'll come. But it's very hard to kind of get to a new place, especially if you're not an East Coaster. It looks a lot different.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I went out west once and I thought I could find my way around because I could find my way around the woods back home in New Jersey and no problem. And I never got lost. And it's a big difference out west. Oh, yeah. I was like, we need a guide. I can't do this. But okay. Yeah. So, You've done your prep. Anything else on prep before I move on?
So we talk book learning, we talk field learning, and I would encourage. So the only other thing that I would say is don't fall into the trap of just Gettysburg. There is a much bigger picture that is surrounding Gettysburg. Yeah. We had 3 days, but there's 4 years worth of war, and then there's a number of years pre-Civil War and a number of years post-Civil War that are all going to be infected and kind of tied in not only to the battle itself, but some of the people that are here. that they are gonna have some lead-ins to, you know, the Civil War and the causes, and then they're fighting in this, you know, event, and then they have some things that they're doing post-war.
Right.
And so not putting Gettysburg in kind of a little bubble, but understanding that there is all this other stuff happening, and being familiar enough, you know, with that is also important.
And that's, you know, it's funny, when I started this, I started it as a way to study for the guide exam by just interviewing people. And I said, well, maybe someone else can find value in it too, so I'll put it out there. I just wanted it for myself, because I had already read a lot. And I'd already taken a lot of notes, and I'm like, I don't want to do that again, you know? So I figured, what's a different way I can do this? And after a couple of years of doing Gettysburg only, I started realizing, like, yeah, I mean, you could just only study Gettysburg and, you know, be an expert on the battle, those 3 days, and maybe the week or two before and after. But really, like, it doesn't make any sense unless you know the 2 years leading up to it, or the years before the war leading into the war. And then also you kind of, well, what happened to these guys, you know? And so what was it like afterwards? And what was the war? What was 19th century America like, militarily and otherwise? And so on our Patreon, where the subscribers are, is I started saying, you know what, I'm becoming more interested in all this other stuff. So I'm going to interview people about this other stuff and these books on other parts of the war and lifestyle and things like that back in those days, because I think it'll make us better students of the battle if we can dive into that stuff. And it's very true. And it's also, the thing is, though, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to pass this test, because, so my question is, how much outside of Gettysburg should people go? Because you know, somebody might be hearing this going, oh my God, I never even thought of that. I've only been studying the battle, and now we've got only like 5-6 months till December. What do we do? How do I do that?
No, I don't think we've got to go back to the Articles of Confederation. You know, I think we can move a little bit closer to the actual, but I would say, you know,
like an idiot's guide to the Civil War, would that be enough?
No.
Okay.
That would not be enough.
All right, so you got to know a little more than that.
Nor would I recommend just reading The Killer Angels.
Okay.
It's something.
Yeah.
And it's an important piece of literature related.
But then if you read that, you should probably read Scott Hartwig's A Killer Angel's Companion.
You should probably do that, which then will lead you down into, I should probably read Coddington.
Yeah.
You know, I should probably read Sears.
Right.
I should probably check out
the history
individual
books.
Studies on July 1, 2, and 3. There is, I'll say this carefully, there are many, many books that maybe are not super academic studies that are a good first introduction. So Killer Angels, for example, I'll always say this, you know, if that's going to get somebody interested in the story, then that's great. My hope is that they go forward, they continue with that, and that's not their only thing. But I mean, back to your original question, I mean, I would be looking at the decade before. What is all of this leading up to this conflict in the United States? You know, you have this antebellum era that a lot of this is rooted in that. So being aware of that. Now, I don't need every, you know, political action, you know, in Congress from 1842 to, you know, 1861. But nonetheless, there has to be some familiarity. Same thing with the consequences of the war. We didn't just close the door and okay, we're done. And we had this little thing.
Right.
Let's
Everybody
go on.
shake hands and go home.
There's ramifications even today of what happened. So again, I would say that you don't have to study the Civil War up to Vietnam. But the decade after, a decade or two after, just being familiar, but then also the larger picture. How did this event even begin? You go back to the causes and the introduction of slavery and just understanding that general concept.
Right.
And same thing with post. What did this do to the United States? What did it do to the military? What did it do to the political sphere? Is
the thinking behind that Gettysburg, most popular Civil War site, I would argue, and I've heard this said a lot by Park Service people, that, if someone is going to visit a Civil War site chances are it's going to be Gettysburg. So we got to like give them as much information as we can about the Civil War, because this might be the only exposure to it they'll have outside of elementary school or middle school or whatever it is that you learn. Is that kind of the thinking there? Or has that always been the way where you needed to have it in the context of?
I would say that you used to be able to get away with more Central Gettysburg type of things. But as the licensing process, as the exam, as people will shorten it to, has expanded, you definitely need to add in, more of that stuff. And one of the important things, and then the reason, the crux of all this is, if you're standing out there on Little Round Top whenever it opens, and you're standing somewhere, East Cemetery Hill, wherever it could be, and somebody's like, well, why Gettysburg? Or, why was this even happening to start? I mean, if you don't have that that's where that background comes in.
Right.
And if you can't answer that basic visitor question, because they're asking with sincerity, like, well, why?
Right.
I may not have even known about.
And why up here? Why was it up here?
Why,
thought it was all down south. I thought the war was in Virginia.
Yeah. But and so yes, and so too, are people going to visit other historic sites? Of course they are. Are they going to get a full Civil War knowledge? The thought was that Gettysburg was going to be the place, and if we can tell the whole story, because this might only be the one place they ever go, then we're going to try and do that and try and give people an introduction to, like, our museum. As soon as you walk in, it's causes. It's why is this thing happening? So between, gathering some of that information and, again, with your licensed guide, that's important to understand. Or else it's just people, fighting each other and you don't know why they're making the decisions they are.
Decided to have a brawl.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got all my book learning done.
Yep.
I've been to the battlefield a bunch of times. I can tell you where things are. Drop me here in the middle of the night in the complete darkness, and if I don't get arrested for being here after sunset, I could tell you where I am in the dark, right? I'm that good.
Yeah.
Now I sit down to take the written exam. So here we go into part 2, the exam. Okay. So this is just the written part we're going to talk about now. Okay. Tell me all the answers that are going to be on the... No.
The answers are A.
All right. There you heard it here first, folks. No, but seriously. I'm going to go in to take the exam. What is it like? I hear it's very... it's almost like taking an exam in prison. True?
In prison? No, we're nice people.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
I would like to think I'm nice. I don't know.
All right. Well, this is good to hear.
Yeah. So, now... The exam, though, is rigorous, number one.
How many questions?
Depends.
But like over 100?
Yeah.
Under 200?
Yeah.
Over 150?
I don't know yet.
Maybe. So
I'm still
between
working on
100 and 200 questions?
Easy. Yeah.
Are they multiple guess?
No.
Fill in the blanks.
If we're talking about the morning portion of the written exam.
Okay.
All right, morning portion only.
Yes.
Previously, it used to be true, false, multiple choice, some short answers, and fill in the blanks. It is all fill in the blank.
Okay, that's how you start your day.
That's how you say good morning. Good morning. Welcome.
Fill in the blank
to Gettysburg. It's fill in the blank, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
We want people to know the knowledge. We want people to have that recall, because in the middle of the field, you don't get 4 answers to choose from. You need to know the answer. And that is one way that we can, in a sense, guarantee that type of understanding and recall. Multiple choice, you got a 25% chance, right, of getting it correct. True, false, let me tell you how hard those questions are to write, especially in a historical world. It can be done. Yeah. But there's too much wiggle room. And what we don't want is an exam that has room for error or room for misunderstanding the question or having to explain it then and there. Right. The exam is the exam has integrity, and I want that integrity to maintain. I think we've increased the integrity of the exam, and the seepage of questions that happened previously.
You mean like
decades ago?
Questions got out?
Yes.
You mean? Okay.
Yeah, questions got out. And that doesn't do anybody any favors. I mean...
Because you don't reuse the questions. I mean, some of them I'm sure you do, but I mean, like, it's not like the same test every time.
Correct. Now, past exams use some of the same questions. So, if you remembered it, then you had that extra advantage. But trying to make an equal playing field here. So everyone's got to do fill in the blank. And again, trying to keep that integrity and not allow for seepage of questions out into the general public. But so that morning portion is all fill in the blank and lasts for 3 hours. And you sit and you answer as many questions as you can. I mean, ideally you answer all of them, but you put your best effort forward, and then there's a lunch break.
Okay.
And at that point, we do ask that you leave the testing campus. We don't want anyone lingering around. There's things we have to talk about and discuss. So again, back to that integrity. The campus doesn't shut down, but we shut the doors. And everyone,
Where is the test given?
Harrisburg Area Community College, Gettysburg campus.
Okay.
So then everyone goes out for lunch. We're doing our thing to set up for the afternoon portion. Now, the afternoon portion is essay. And depending on, the test, it could range from 5 essay questions where you pick a number and then you answer X number out of the 5. So you get to look and see which ones, you can answer the best. Okay. Sometimes there might be one question that everyone is answering no matter what. And then there's a selection. And this kind of goes back to something you brought up earlier about us wanting guides. Right. So giving them the flexibility of answering their strong suits. Okay. There's the advantage. Yeah. Don't pick the one about a law or a legal document that you don't know. Right. Pick the one that about A.P. Hill or General Lee or causes of the war, so whatever that question could be. So again, that's to the advantage of the test taker. But yeah, it's again 3 hours essay. And the essays have to be essays, not just like bullet points, but you need to develop your thoughts. There has to be
able to communicate.
Bingo. And so that's kind of the thought. So there's thought behind each component of the exam and then of the licensing process. Because one thing that when you said, hey, I've got my book learning, I've got my field learning, the one thing I didn't interject is you have to be able to tell a story. And we'll get to that later. Yeah. But that essay is kind of the start of, can you tell that story? Can you answer this question with a nice introduction, with a thesis statement, with your supporting evidence, and then your conclusion, so to speak, as to why all of this is answering the question.
Now, that's like a 6 hour plus lunch process. It's like a full day. It's like a full work day.
It's all day.
And then after that, everybody goes to the bar, gets hammered, probably. And then you sit and wait, right? How long does it take before they get the results?
So, the written exam is December 7th, 2024. So we start grading as soon as possible.
You use Scantron, or is it all by hand?
It's all by hand.
Oh, boy. Oh, how many people are you expecting this year? Do you have an idea?
To register?
Yeah.
No idea. There's no way to predict. Yeah. I can tell you that I think, if I have my numbers right, in 2015, we had about 150. Not all showed, just a handful did not show. And then in 2017, I think I had like 97 and 93 or 94 sat. So there is, life happens and, folks will register, but not be able to make it for whatever reason. But it's not a lot.
My prediction, Price is Right rules, close without going over, 251.
You're killing me.
I you know why though? Because
you're making me nervous.
It's been so long. It's been 7 years.
It has,
and people have been waiting, and more people have decided in the meantime. I think I want to do this, so I think 250.
Right. So you're coming in a grade, right? No.
I'll help you grade. Sure. Yeah. Sure.
We're gonna put you to work.
All right. So the grades, okay, whatever. It's going to take however long it takes.
It's going to take a couple weeks.
Okay.
See, because we're grading, we're compiling, we're making sure that the grading is accurate. You know. And,
so like do you double grade? Do you grade it and then hand it off to someone else to double check your work?
Yeah, we have our checks and balances, and I'm going to shout out to all the licensed battlefield guides who donate their time to do this. Not only the grading, but they also are donating time as proctors for the exam. So to get back, it's not like taking an exam in prison or anything like that. It is like taking the SAT. If you've taken the SAT or the GRE, or, I'm not saying our content is similar, but, it's, hey, don't bring your phone in. Don't bring your headphones in. I don't want to see, AirPods in. It's a lockdown. We make sure, we do our best to ensure that the playing field is even and no one is taking an advantage. So it is a testing atmosphere. It's not, I said camaraderie and fraternity earlier. That's outside the doors where everybody is, enjoying their coffee and getting ready and boosting everybody up. Once you're in that building though, it's an exam.
Right.
And it's serious.
Yeah. All right. Now you've taken that, and now how do you decide who moves on to the next level? Is it, you say, all right, let's do this year. Everybody that scores over 95, we're going to talk to. Is that how it works, or how does that go?
No. So what we do, since we don't, so for example, let's relate it to a college class. Okay. Or high school. You would have that syllabus. You would know what each assignment was weighted or rated. And that instructor would kind of know the level of that class. And then, many times college instructors, rated on the curve because that massive final exam, the highest score out of 100 was a 42. And then they give that person an A, right? They do it on the bell curve. Well, since we don't know our body of test takers, what we have to do is kind of see where the natural scores fall. So I'll give you like extreme examples, okay? Because we fall in the middle. So if everyone were to register, and I'm not saying it's you guys, don't panic, okay? If you're going to register, don't panic. It's an argument. But if all of the test takers were to take the exam, and let's say it was out of 100 points, okay, for sake of argument, and let's say the highest score was a 43. That person is not, and everyone else is then below. That tells me that this group is not going to be moving forward to be licensed.
The whole group.
Right. Well, I mean, if the highest score is a 43%, so that's not even past.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you don't say, okay, well, now let's make the highest score 43.
Right, no, exactly.
Then you go, everybody's done.
Because we do need to be responsible,
of course,
in that, and again, for the sake of argument, if that were to happen, we would have to reevaluate, and we would have to say, not this year.
Right.
Because we do have a responsibility to ensure that the people that are licensed are quality individuals. They may be quality in their personal lives and in their jobs, but in this specific case,
they're qualified individuals.
Yeah, it didn't work out.
Right.
Now, take the other extreme, and if everyone scores a 100%, that's a problem. Because then the test wasn't rigorous enough.
Right.
And what we found was, after the movie came out in, 93, I think, and then you had the Burns series and Glory and all this like propulsion into the American Civil War. What was happening with the test was most people were scoring within that 95 to 100 range, and that's why the exam became more rigorous. Because it had to find that dividing line.
Okay.
More people were studying. More people were getting engaged in this material and this era of history. So that was something that kind of came out of that. We're still finding that. And obviously the exam has taken on a mystique, as you like to say. So, in that example, if too many people score too high, we know something's wrong with the exam, and then we would have to reevaluate. My hope is that we find a natural break where the scores are appropriate for what we are looking for, and then there's a break, and then there's the folks that, hey, I would encourage you to try again.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so the people that make the cut then move on to, what do we call it here? The panel interview.
Tier 2, the panel interview.
Okay. Tier 2, the panel interview. So now here's my understanding of it, and what I hear other people say who don't know any better, like me, and you tell me where we're wrong. It is an interview to gauge many things, I'm sure, but mainly that you have a personality and you can talk to people. Maybe that's boiled down, but am I right at all there, or what? Where?
So you've
where
got
are we?
part of it.
Okay.
Because remember, all of these components are important. Knowledge does not make a licensed battlefield guide.
Correct.
You've got to be able to do all this other stuff. So the interview, as we've done them in the past, we're done a couple different ways, but the general idea is that it's what we call a structured interview, where you are given 5 questions, whatever that number may be, but each person is given the same questions, and those answers are evaluated against a rubric. As the whole entire process, rubric, hashtag rubric. That's all we talk about. But it is an opportunity for them to, again, demonstrate knowledge.
Okay.
Because it's one thing to be able to write it down and like knowledge dump onto the exam.
Right.
But now you're talking with people. You've got to be able to converse in that same knowledge. So we're looking for knowledge. We are looking for personality. We are looking for the ability to convey sometimes complex information, sometimes very basic information. You can get yourself in a quagmire on either. I think some of the very common examples are, we ask what I would call a simple question. The answer is 7,845 words, and 6 hours later, we finally wrap that up.
The answer, yeah.
Think of that to a visitor.
Yeah.
Is that going to work? That's not going to work.
Snore.
Now we ask a very complex question. Let's say complex meaning field action. Okay. There's things, or there's differing opinions or something. And you say, well, it was just that easy. It was that. In 0.05 seconds that you've completed your answer. Whereas that, again, generally understood that question would have elicited a much longer answer with varying components.
So it's when you say all these components matter, obviously they do. Some more than others, or are they all as equal as they can be?
I mean, we do try and keep them as equal as they can be.
Right.
I would say, though, that, red flag would be as if we ask a battle-related question or historical-related question, and that individual has no information whatsoever. That's a little concerning.
Sure.
Because of what you're trying to do. Right. So, we will evaluate. Some things may be weighted more points against something else.
Right.
But it's not going to be so disparate that it would skew something.
Okay. Now, and this is, I'm going to concede, it's probably just the way I imagine things. But I imagine this part of it, the panel interview. Let's say I'm there. I'm sitting in a chair under a bright light in the middle of the room, tied to the chair. And then there's people behind a table. Which
you can't see, right?
I can't see them because they're in, the light is just one light in the middle of the room hanging from the ceiling. Excuse me. And they ask me the rapid fire questions. And if I don't answer them fast enough, they spray me with water, or I don't know what. Am I close?
Absolutely.
No, I'm not, I'm sure.
No.
You understand, though. I guess what I'm saying is, you guys understand how nerve-wracking this is for somebody, and how many people have dreamed for years about doing this, and this is their moment. And and that you could be very qualified. You could be someone who could tell a story. You could be someone with a personality, someone who has all the book learning and did well on the test, and just choke because of the pressure. So I'm sure you guys are aware of that, and you're not trying to trip people up, is my point.
Correct. And everything that you said, except for the dark nights, lights, and being tied to the chair, happens. There are some people that you could kind of tell, probably could have done it. probably could have passed, whatever section they may not have passed. And you could kind of see that, oh man, they could have had it, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't there that day.
Right.
And, that is a reality. I would venture a guess that most of the individuals that are going to be seated for these panel interviews have done a job interview in some shape, form, or fashion.
Which are also nerve-wracking.
True.
For some people.
But it shouldn't be unfamiliar.
Right. Right.
And so I don't believe we're trying to throw anything in that folks have not experienced in some shape, form, or fashion before. So if you were evaluated in school for a public speech, if you were evaluated for a 4-H project, if you were evaluated for your Eagle Scout presentation or your college course, whatever it could be, if you have to speak as part of your job, if you have to deliver bad news as part of your job, you've got to be able to talk to people in some shape, form, or fashion.
Here's a question. When this is going on, and I guess later during the oral, do whoever's doing the evaluating, do you wear your uniforms or do you dress in civvies?
During the Tier 1 written exam, during the panel interview, we are in uniform.
Interesting.
During the field practicum, which we'll get to, previously there was a classroom portion,
right,
and then there's field portion. That, it really depends on what we're doing. If we're inside all day, it's probably uniform. But when I go outside, like if I'm bringing those with me that are participating in the Tier 3, I find it better for me not to be in uniform so that there's no distractions, so that we just look like another group out there enjoying the field. Right. I don't want people coming up to me and throwing off any of the participants.
Sure. But also, I'm thinking if I'm sitting across from people in uniform, that might be a little more intimidating than if you were just in your civilian clothing, right? For the panel interview.
Potentially,
yeah.
But I mean,
I'm not worried. I'm not going to make it that far.
I'm in uniform every day, so it's not like I dressed up for the occasion.
Yeah, right.
I think that has to be expected that I am a Park Service employee. I'm going to be wearing my uniform 98% of the time.
Well, and not only that, but if you get a license, you could very well find yourself giving the President of the United States a tour or some other dignitary. You know what I mean? I know that happens.
Then you're in uniform yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But you shouldn't be intimidated by you in a Park Service uniform. Correct. Because you might be talking to the King of Siam someday.
Who knows who can walk through the doors? Yeah. I mean, one time it was a number of years ago when we first opened, we turned around and on the phone was Tom Hanks, right on the caller ID. So yeah, anybody can show up is what I'm saying. Yeah. So you have to be prepared for anything. I mean, we have people that walk in the front door and you can tell instantly that there's something going on by the suits, the no tie, the open collar, but that group
that guy's in the mafia. Oh no! Oh, sorry. I misunderstood what you were saying. Okay. So I do well in the panel interview.
Okay.
I move on.
Yeah.
Now I am in the field practicum. Mm-hmm. What the hell is the field practicum, and why can't you speak English?
Because. So this was something that was implemented when I took over the program, as going back to an earlier point, trying to address the gap between that written exam and the oral exam of exams previous. Mm-hmm. And we were really finding that, as we said, we want people to pass. We want people to be licensed. What can we do to help? So one of those things is if you aren't able to get to the field as much as possible, or maybe speaking in public in an outdoor setting is completely different than, you're entering the data and the computer systems or whatever.
Right.
We wanted to be able to give individuals some ideas of how to go about doing that. And the ways we've done it in the past is we'd have some classroom instruction, and then we would have speaking roles out on the battlefield, in which they would get ahead of time. And so we're now basing it on, we know you've got the content knowledge because you're here. We know that initially you moved forward from the panel interview because you're here. So you've got all of this. Now we need to kind of massage it and form it up and get it, into what will hopefully translate to your oral exam.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a little prep course, so to speak, right before that oral exam.
Sure.
It was so much of a jump between a written exam and now you've got a 2 hours worth of information. So we did this field practicum to try and give folks a chance to present out on the field varying topics. And just because you were out at the field at one location did not mean your topic was necessarily directly related to that location. But how did you handle it? How are you handling the fact that you're doing this in the spring and there's now, foliage all over the trees versus doing it at a different time? And then what we were able to do is evaluate that, provide them pointers, and there was a chance previously to fix your mistakes.
Okay.
And do a course correction. I'm like, oh, okay, you're right. I should have stood here because now the quote unquote visitors, which was the class, can see X or Y. Or I should remember that I should not turn my back to the people I'm speaking to.
Right.
Some of those small things that if we can iron those out now, guess what? You have potentially a better chance of passing the oral exam because that's our end goal.
Okay. So you do that as a class. So everybody that made it past the panel interview, they're all now in a class together and you're all doing this.
We did it in 2 sections.
2 sections?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would divide up, at least back in 2017, we took all of those who moved forward from the panel interview.
How many moved forward? Would you say it was 93 that sat?
Put me on the spot. I think we had
roughly
20-something.
20-something. Okay.
So we would divide that. And then we did a field practicum in April, I believe, and it was over the weekend. And then we had another one in August. So that way we could, focus on those individuals, get them out on the field, evaluate them. So, we divided it up. It seemed to work well, and go from there.
And so this sounds like a pretty straightforward part of the process. But you did mention one in April and one in August.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, one of the first questions I asked you when we sat down was about how long is this process? And there's not an exact number, but it's like roughly, you try to keep it under a year. Yes. So like we said, 9 months to a year, but probably to be safe, plan on a year from when you take the written, correct?
Yes.
Is it a year from the written or a year from?
It's a year from the written.
Okay.
So one of the things that I wanted to do that I had heard about over the course of time at Gettysburg was the gap between when you take the written and when you would do your oral. And we're not talking just a couple of months. There were some individuals where it was a couple of years before they were called up to do the oral exam. That's a long time to forget a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden try and refamiliarize with things. Yeah. So the idea was that, and again, for dividing that tier 3 group, the idea is that if we can, work with these individuals, then those that move forward, as long as they meet the rubric requirements, then they are scheduled for their oral exams, like roughly 6 weeks after that. So we're talking, June, end of May, right? June, somewhere in there.
Something like that.
And then they will conduct their oral exams over the summer.
Okay.
So in theory, they could be licensed so they started in December. Some could have been licensed by June.
Got it.
And now the August cohort from that tier 3, okay, they're going to do their tier 3 field practicum, same idea, speaking parts, evaluation, et cetera, classroom portions. And then they're going to take their oral exams between August and, whenever we can schedule them. Right. But the idea was that it was no more than a year.
Okay.
From the time you started till the time you received the license.
So this is a process, and it is a commitment in time as well. I mean, you have to be able to get here. If you're not close by, you've got to be able to get here several times a year. For how many days now when you're here doing the field practicum? Like how many days is is it a weekend or just one day or?
So it was a Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
I can't remember. We changed it up a little bit between 2015 and 2017. I think one of them had like a Friday afternoon component, but I'd have to double check. Nonetheless, the weekend was, a lot of classroom, go out and practice, let's see what you got. And then there was the evaluative component, the next day, so that you had a night and an evening to redo and get yourself ready, for Sunday presentations. But yes, that is one of the other things where, on a level, you've got to be dedicated to that. You have to have the ability to do that. We have had a number of guides who have been licensed who are from all over. I've had people who, lived in Florida, who lived in California, who lived in Ohio, North Carolina, Vermont, attain their license. But as far as being committed to the process, yes, you have to be able to be here for the written exam, and whatever that's going to take, because everyone's situation is different.
Right.
If you're flying, like I remember when we were registering, like I had people from Idaho coming in to take this exam. So for them, it's a flight, I'm assuming, on Friday, maybe Thursday if they want to be extra settled and sure. Yeah. You're hoteling it, or maybe you're staying with a friend, I don't know. And then you're here for the test Saturday, and then maybe flying out Sunday, just depends on things. So, you're committing at least 3-4 days there. Again, if you're from a significant distance, you've got 2 days for the panel interviews, at least as it was done in the past. You've got 3 days potentially for the field practicum. And then if we're ready to jump ahead for the oral exam, you've got potentially 2 to 6 days for the oral exam, just on how you need to make your arrangements, to be in the area.
Right. Really? 2 to 6 days?
Well, I say that because your oral exam is scheduled. I will send you an email. It's a very official, letter, your time. Here are the instructions. Here, be prepared, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so if, let's just say exams happen any day of the week. So they're not just on Saturdays.
Okay.
They could be any day of the week, because again, we want people to be on the rolls, and we can't just wait for every Saturday or we'll never get there.
Right.
So let's say, it's on a Tuesday. Well, if you're flying out or you're driving a significant distance, let's say you're doing that Sunday. Well, Monday, at minimum, you want to be practicing.
Right.
That oral exam.
Okay.
Some people are going to want to practice 1 or 2 days, especially if there might be weird things going on the battlefield. Who knows? A road's being paved that I wasn't prepared for. Now I've got to redo my tour. So depending on how many prep days that individual needs.
So that would be, the 2 to 6 isn't what you require. 2 to 6 is what you might need to,
as a person,
just to prepare yourself. Yeah. And that's not a bad idea. Is come in and give yourself a few days to get comfortable. All right. Now the oral exam. So, as I understand it, it's you and a guide.
Yes.
And this person takes you on an exam, on a tour, and you would what? Like, I don't want to give too many details away. You tell me what they can expect there.
Sure. So you make it to the Tier 4 oral exam, and the idea is that you are presenting a 2-hour tour of the battlefield to a general visitor. And we go back, and I'm hoping you can see how all this stuff builds. But one of the other components from Tier 2 and even Tier 3 is the ability to tell a story. Because we're not just reciting facts. It's not necessarily an academic lecture for a general tour. There are stories to be told. There's interesting civilian stories. There's soldier stories. There's Sally the dog. All these different components that bring to life the battlefield. Most general visitors are not going to be interested in the order of battle. From top to bottom. Right. They're interested in these other things. So you have to be able to know the order of battle, generally, but then also know how to weave a story together that takes these individuals from the opening shots of the Battle of Gettysburg through some of the leaders' decisions and why is this happening and what are the townspeople thinking? And as these men roll through these farmsteads, what is happening to these civilians that are now displaced or hiding in the basement, out on July or hiding in the cemetery or seminary, July 1st. Weaving that story together is extremely important. So that oral exam is an evaluation of knowledge. Again, that's got to be there. An evaluation of technique. Again, I kind of mentioned it that you're not going to stand with your back toward your guests or, or your clients, or you want to make sure that when you are speaking, you are clear, that you are concise when you need to be, that you can expound when you need to, that you are navigating your visitors, but you're also working in that story. So a lot of different components go into that.
What about if you don't know?
The answer to a question?
Yes.
Then you don't know.
And you say it.
Absolutely.
With no shame.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you don't go, I don't know, forget it, I'll take you back to your cars. Like the test isn't over, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
You want to, in other words, what I'm getting at is you guys want to hear them say, I don't know, and not make up a story.
I would like to hear them say, I don't know if they don't know. But if we don't know through the whole tour, then
of course,
then we're not knowing a lot.
Right.
So, an honest, genuine, I don't know is absolutely okay. Because there is no guide or park ranger that knows everything about the Battle of Gettysburg at that one moment.
Right.
You might have known it 6 months ago,
right,
but you forgot.
Yeah.
You know?
The brain is a terrible thing. It fails us after a certain age.
I'd have to go back and brush up on umpteen different programs. And people are I'm like, I don't know. But the idea is, how do you follow that up? Are you dismissive or, a wave of the hand and it's no big deal? That's not professional. That's not how you handle it. So you are providing a professional service. And so you want to maintain that level of professionalism.
Driving skills
are pretty important.
Are you graded on them?
You are.
You are.
You are. Well, I can't have you careening down West Confederate at 70.
I agree. So a rolling stop's okay? Or do I have to stop completely at a stop sign?
What does the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation say?
It says I have to, and I've gotten tickets for rolling stops, so I know that I can't do those.
Correct. So
stop me and stop, guys.
25 is 25.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? You're on the field, and you have to abide by the rules and regulations. And so, that is critical because licensed guides are not required to, but many times offer to drive the vehicles of visitors. Now, it's up to the visitor if they want to do that. Now, in this case, for the oral exam, that examinee is driving their own vehicle.
Okay. So clean your car before the exam.
Please. Please.
Oh, God.
There have been times.
I'll ask after the show's over.
So, please have your vehicle ready. Please have a full tank of gas.
Oh, that's a good one, too. Have you ever had somebody run out of gas?
No.
Okay.
It's been a little dicey a few times. Be prepared to have guests in the car, and understand your vehicle. If you have rented a vehicle for your oral exam, you should know the workings of said vehicle.
Yeah.
That is important.
Okay.
If you are borrowing a car from a friend in the area because you are out of state, make sure you understand that car. Make sure you understand all the components that go.
So that's interesting. So if I'm from, say, California and I fly out here I don't drive out, I fly out, I'm going to have to rent a car just to do the exam.
Correct.
So there's a cost.
Beyond
the trip, there's a cost just to take the exam there.
There is.
Yeah.
There is.
Okay. And keep that in mind.
And you do. And honestly, for those listening, watching, who are interested in this, that is a significant component of this, of a self-evaluation that one should do.
Yeah.
If they're looking to, sit for the guide exam or try and go through this process, that you have to be aware of what it's going to take based on where you are. and I don't want to say this to be mean, but if you're not in a place where all this is going to fall in nicely, I wouldn't force it. I mean, I know a lot of people are excited about this, and it's been in their retirement plan, or it's been a dream, or they've experienced a tour and they've always wanted to do it themselves. But please understand what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And as nice as it might be to become a licensed battlefield guide, I would not want someone to put themselves in sort of a detrimental position in order to do that.
Yeah.
So really, do a little self-evaluation on what it's going to take.
So you pass the oral.
Well.
Oh, wait, sorry, there's more. Go ahead.
There's more.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
You have 2 chances.
Oh, that was my next question. Okay, good.
I beat you to it.
Yeah.
So you have 2 chances to pass the oral exam, but we are hoping that you pass on the first.
Well, sure. Who wants to go through that again?
And that's why we do everything that we do. That is the goal.
Gotcha.
Because again, decades ago, what we were finding is that, the old rule of, okay, now you're doing your oral exam, you've got 2 chances. You could probably go down the line to everyone, and everyone knew they were going to fail on the first one. They were going to get all their hints, and then they were going to pass the second one. Well, why? Why are we doing that? That is wasting so much time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's helpful to kind of go in knowing that you're going to fail.
Well, maybe it's like low expectations, like if I pass, woohoo, we'll get champagne with dinner tonight. But
it almost became this weird sort of badge of honor, or you got to slog through 2 oral exams. You got to do the 2 oral exams.
Right.
That's not what I want. And I don't think if we can help it, I don't think anybody else really wants to have to return back for that.
No.
So we were able, through this newer process, to have people pass on their first oral exam. Was it perfect? No, but it was definitely quality.
What you mean when you say was it perfect? Was the passing perfect, or is that what you mean?
The passing level was perfect. Would that person have said, "Yeah, I probably could have improved this, and I could have improved that"? Absolutely. And that's
but you're not looking for perfection. You understand these people aren't guides already. So I mean, obviously they're not. So if they're thinking that's what you're looking for, they're psyching themselves up.
Yeah.
Or out.
Exactly. And, we're looking for someone who's genuine, for someone who's humble,
right,
for someone who is able to handle themselves professionally. And, we're going to know based on what we see during, and, we got a rubric, of course, we got a rubric. Mm-hmm. We're going to apply everything. We're not going to give anyone a pass just because.
Right.
But we're going to apply everything. And then there's a team evaluation that I have with the licensed battlefield guide. And, if everything has hit that rubric, and there were a couple mistakes, there might be a misspeak on historical knowledge. There might be a designating something on the field and they didn't have it correct, that's not going to fail you.
Okay.
It's how you handle it. Now, if you have 40 of those things,
okay, so
we got
also good to know.
But the idea is, what did you bring forward? How was the tour overall? Did it meet those base expectations that the rubric has? And you can definitely pass on the first one.
Right. But you get a second chance if you do. Now,
you do.
That second chance, how long am I waiting to get it?
Depends on when we can schedule it.
So I'm a guy from California. I'm out here for 5 days. My test is on the 3rd day. It's not probable, but possible that could be rescheduled before I leave?
No.
Oh,
no,
so it wouldn't be that soon.
No.
Okay.
That used to happen. It used to kind of be like the next day or
right,
very shortly after. I'm not going to do that.
So the California guy is coming back out one more time, but he's going to be doing that anyway if he gets his license.
Or gal.
Oh, sorry. Person. The California person is going to come out and,
What I'm going to do is, obviously I have a job, right? Yeah. I know they probably have a job.
Yeah.
And I got to be respectful of that. I'm respectful of the time they're taking off. So I'm going to work with them. I'm not going to try and steamroll them into a Monday at 2 p.m.
Right.
I'm going to be like, all right, what do you got? when's the next time you can come out? When does it fit in my schedule? Are you on vacation? Are you out of the country? I mean, I've had to work around a whole bunch of things.
Sure.
And then we're going to try and get it scheduled within a reasonable window. I don't want to wait 8 months, unless they've got some significant life thing going on. It doesn't do them any good to have that much of a gap in between, those exams. But we'll get it scheduled as soon as we reasonably and respectfully can.
Going all the way back to the written, are people identified by their names, or do they receive a number or something like that? Is it blind, in other words?
So a couple different levels. So you're going to check in and we're going to know who you are. Okay, you got to check in.
Yeah.
We got to see who you are. But then after that, no, your test is a number.
Is a number.
And
but it's assigned to...
Yeah, so you could be test number 43.
Right. But so in other words,
my graders will not know that your test is number 43.
Okay.
And that is on purpose.
So now, and the reason I ask is because I saw, and again, this is why we're doing this episode, because there's a lot of craziness out there and all these wacky theories and stuff. And someone had said that I don't remember if they had heard or they believe, okay,
gotcha.
that this year they're going to choose more women, even if there's a qualified, right, yeah, like it's just to get more women on the guide force.
Well, we could save on the grading and just start pulling names out of a hat.
Well, that's right. That's why I asked this. So that's not possible. From what I understand here now, what you're saying is because everybody's a number.
Correct.
And graders don't know the gender of the number.
No.
It's just cold, hard numbers. And then you pass, you fail, or you get the grade, however the hell you do it. And then that's it. Right. And then we find out what you are later.
Yeah. There are only a few individuals that would be able to connect who was who.
Yeah.
But no, the idea is...
But they're not grading.
Now, again, back to the integrity of the exam.
Yeah.
We are trying to make sure that it is as above board and professional as possible.
Okay, there you go, conspiracy theorists.
And so, so to that, I tell the folks who are grading and who are part of the committee that helps me write the exam and get all these sessions together. God bless them. I couldn't do it all myself. That I do expect that, mum's the word.
Right.
Like, you're not sharing details about the exam or anything that we're working on. And for all my proctors, the same thing. You're not sharing information. You're not being impartial. You're not being partial to anyone.
Right.
So far, so good.
All right. Now, so I've passed the oral on the first time. Don't need to take it a second time. Now, how long does it take before I have that badge and patch?
That day.
So you just go, congratulations, you did it, and you're badge number 202 or whatever, and here you go.
And 9 times out of 10, there's a little bit of a delay. So, that person obviously, needs a little bit of time maybe to decompress, and figure out their next steps. But technically, as of that quote unquote minute, they could be considered a licensed battlefield guide. Now, they will need to pay a fee for their license, and it would be prorated for the appropriate amount.
Right.
And then I hand out their licensed battlefield guide badge and license. And then they are responsible for compiling the uniform components. And so that, there's going to be a gap in between the time they're licensed and the time they can give a tour, because they've got to get all that stuff organized. They may have to, they may have to move out here. They may have to maybe find an interim place, and they want to get the lay of the land. But I do recommend that they jump into the fray quickly, because your oral exam is so different from your first guided tour with the general public.
Yeah.
And so you need to shift.
Yeah.
And here's the last and final shift. Maybe not last and final, but another shift that they have to be able to do is you have to remove yourself now from the examination style process. And now you have to focus on what the general public is requiring of you. Now you're upholding the rules and regulations of the guide service, the code of federal regulations that we and they follow. But now you have to navigate all that is the general public. And, 9 times out of 10, your tours are going to be very kind of the normal, common history of Gettysburg, July 1, 2, 3 type tours. And then you're going to get thrown the curveball. And it's going to be a very specific tour on a specific commander for a specific 30 minutes. And, you have to be able to adapt and do that. Right. Or it's going to be, all we want to do is take photos and we hired you to kind of drive us around. Yeah. And regardless of how one may feel about that, the idea, though, is that they have hired you. You can find the moments to impart and find those connections between the photos that they want to take or the areas they want to see and some stories. Yeah. And if they walk away with a great experience, then you've done your job as a licensed guide.
We did a show yesterday with 2 guides about what to expect after you have your license as a guide. And I asked Ralph Siegel, I said, I asked them both. I said, how do you handle the know-it-all dad, for example? And Ralph immediately didn't waste a second, and he just said, it's their tour. They paid for the tour.
Way to go, Ralph.
Yeah, if he wants to, show off for his kids and everything, far be it from me. And then Jessie made a good point. She goes, we could lose our voices sometimes. And sometimes you have to cancel a tour or get someone else to take it because you've lost your voice from doing too many buses and yelling over 8th graders or whatever. And she's like, so anytime I get a chance to rest my voice, I'm not going to argue with the guy. If he's paying and he wants to, so, okay, so that leads me then to, now I've just got random questions, okay?
Shoot.
Okay. It sounds to me, and you didn't say this, but the way everything is being described, first of all, during the panel interview, and then when you say, now that you're done testing, you got to shift your mindset now because now you have to create something and be able to adapt to actual interactions with the public. It sounds to me like certain personality types would do better at this than others. And I'm sure that's not true across the board, but it sounds like what you're really looking for are kind of like performers who can remember history.
Not necessarily.
I know, not necessarily.
You would be surprised. You would be surprised at the backgrounds of some of the
I know, yeah.
But
performers, teachers would be good. I'm not saying if you're not, you can't. Lawyers, they're good at research, and they're also if they've performed in front of a court,
True.
It's a performance.
True.
But you have to be able to improvise because if you get, as I noticed the guides that I have worked with and I've seen the groups that they've taken out and I've heard the stories when they come back and I go, well, what did you do? Like, how did you handle that? And there's different answers for everything. And I realized you really do. This isn't, I don't even know what to compare it to. It sounds like it's something very different than what most people do because you deal with the public.
I mean, you definitely have to be adept at that very small group, interpersonal communication. If your tour is 2 people or 3 people, I would rather give a talk to 400 individuals than
12.
Than that 1 or 2. Oh,
I know. It's too intimate. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so for guides, as far as any sort of level of performance, let's not blow that out of the water. We don't need top hats and things, okay, during any components
that's not what I mean.
of the licensing process. Okay. But I would agree that there is a level of a performative element. I mean, you don't want to provide a quote about, what's that one from Jeremiah Gage when he's putting the letter in his blood.
Miss Mary, give Miss Mary my dying release.
Right. His letter's dipped in blood and he's writing home and his handwriting on the letter, you can kind of see it starts to, scrawl off at the end. I don't think you want to, if you're going to use that quote, let's just say, if you're going to use that quote, I don't think you want to do it with a stone face and no emotion. I mean, because you're losing the oomph. Why did you bring it in the first place? There was reason behind that. That letter is filled with emotion. so there has to be some level of performative element, and you have to understand when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And I think the another component of being an LBG, as kind of Ralph and Jesse, I guess we're saying, you also have to know when to not be the sage on the stage. You've got to be able to have that humility and be like, I don't always have to talk. It's not all about me imparting every ounce of knowledge that I have to you.
Yes.
And so, that's another component.
So, a guy told me once, he said, because I was like, I don't know if I would actually pass the test, number one. But if I did, I don't really know how good a guide I would be. And he was like, no, I think you'd be a good guide. And he goes, you're good at making things about other people. And I said, well, that's just an act. And he's like, well, whatever, it works. And that's what you have to do. Yeah. So it's because I'm not impressed. Nobody that regularly watches the show will believe this, but it truly is an act that I'm not impressed with myself at all. Right. And so I don't really care to tell you what I know. I would rather tell you what you want to know and not, I don't want to preach. I want to see what you know and then, okay, I could tell you with that, and whatever. But there are some people, though, that I know that are all about, this is what I learned and blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, you're like, what's the story?
I would say more people are going to win in a conversational style as a licensed battlefield guide than standing at, the pulpit or the academic lectern. Right. I mean, there's a time and a place for that. You're out there doing a staff ride and that's the expectation. Right. Absolutely. You've got, folks from Virginia or Kentucky or Oregon and, first of all, they may have never been here before. Some people are deer in headlights at how do we navigate an auto tour? Where are we going? And you've got to be able to have that easy conversation. If you're going to start, bringing up things, about the Joint Committee on the Conduct of War, they're gone. You're going to lose them. So if that's what you think is important in this tour, then, or as a guide, if you're looking at it from the outside looking in, if you're like, well, they need to know about that Joint Committee on the Conduct of War, you've missed it. Now somebody asks a question about it. Okay, that's cool. Now you launch into it. But, having that list of things I must tell you because I know them is not the best approach.
So don't necessarily come up with a standard tour that you're going to give to everybody. Be able to think on your feet is what you're saying. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I would say that the era of that type of tour has gone by the wayside. Yeah. And I would also, God bless him, licensed battlefield guide John Fuss was an individual who I think was known for that. And that guy generated, it was close to 20,000.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And tours, 20,000 tours.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It was the same tour.
Yeah.
And, I knew John for a little while and that works. And it worked.
When he does it.
It worked when he did it. And I think it worked for a specific time period.
Oh, yeah.
Where a certain, either...
when everybody talked like this in films.
Well, that, and then there was a certain, coming out of the education system that was expected. Right. But you have to be able to adapt and...
This stuff, social media, YouTube, everything has, I think, just changed everything. And I think it has changed the way people consume anything. Even in-person, face-to-face encounters are very much, I think, ruined by the way, this crap on the phone and everything. Like we're very impatient. People have everybody has ADD, whether you've been diagnosed or not. We all have it, and it's because of the phones and the internet and how quick everything is. Yeah. And you don't need to. What annoys me the most is when you get into a TV show and for whatever stupid reason they make you wait another week for the next episode. When Netflix has proven you could dump the whole season and we'll all watch it in 2 nights.
Yeah.
My point is we're impatient. We have ADD. And that's kind of why I'm saying, like, it sounds like you need a performer. Maybe it doesn't sound like you need to be kind of a performer, but maybe I'm hearing with everything, what you're saying and what I know of the public and my interactions with them and stuff and the things I see people saying online and everything, it sounds to me like you got to give them some razzmatazz without the top hat, though.
Well, yeah, you know? I mean, you've got the general tour is 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that's going to be driving, some of that's going to be walking to the different sites, but there's a good chunk of it that you do need to fill. And how are you filling it? Are you doing some of that performative element? Are you able to keep them engaged? That's another component of that oral exam. You know, are you able to keep your audience engaged in what is going on? And again, whether that be what's coming from you or how you're interacting, you know, with them.
Or make them cry. I love.
No one gets a medal for making anybody cry.
Well, I mean, it's an unspoken medal. I think that people get. It's an uncast medal that people get. I won't name names, even though this is a nice thing that I'm saying. But a guy who I've known about 20 years, good friend of mine, has worked at Gettysburg since the beginning, and I've gone out on tours, and when we get to Pickett's Charge, especially if it's a late afternoon tour as the sun's starting to go down and everything, and the way he ends it at the angle, I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 moms cry, and I go, you did it again. Like, you know, and I'm like, you keep getting them crying. He's like, oh, shucks. You know, like he doesn't mean to do it. He just loves
I don't think there's
story.
A poster of tick marks for everybody who comes back and,
no,
you know, I got to know.
There isn't. I should have kept one. But I guess my point is that, like, he loves this story so much. And maybe another thing is maybe performer isn't the word. And I'm beating this dead horse. I'm sorry for everybody at home. But maybe heart is the word I'm looking for.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a lot better.
You need to have heart. The head is great because that gives you the facts to back up the heart. But you have to, the story of the Battle of Gettysburg is tragedy. It's not the movie. It's not pageantry. It's not beautiful. It smells. It's ugly. It's miserable. That's painful.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking. And you have to get that because I think the public now, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you would know more about this than I, but I think the public is more interested in those individual stories, not the big picture stuff, but the man on the ground, the Alonzo Cushing story about how he's, you know, commanding his battery or what's left of it with his guts hanging out. Like, that moves people. That puts someone in their shoes. And I think that seems to be what people are more interested nowadays, the individual story. And in order to do that, you have to have a bit of a heart.
Oh, yeah.
And not a lot of intellectuals do.
Yeah. I think there's a slight difference when we're talking about like doing the tours between passion and heart. You know, you can be passionate about Gettysburg and you can want to know all this stuff. But you're right. When that's internalized, when it's truly internalized, and you are, as you're presenting this information, and whether, you know, the Cushing story, any other story on the field, when you've truly internalized that and you're able to then externalize it to your visitors, that's when it's truly genuine. Yeah. If you're trying to force it and you're just reading quotes, everybody knows it right out of the gate. Yep. You know, they know that it's forced and you're just incorporating them to incorporate them. I mean, as far as individual stories, you know, those are important. But I also think that, you know, obviously lately there's been a significant shift in the views of historical events and how people are now looking at things with maybe a more critical eye, a more, you know, socially conscious eye. And so, you know, it will be interesting to see as we continue on, you know, the feedback that the licensed guides bring in about the types of tours, the types of questions, the types of, you know, situations out on the field that they're running into.
Okay, what is the fee for the exam?
To be determined.
TBD. All right. And then are they bringing quotas back for the guides at any time in the near future that you're aware of?
Believe you're talking about tour minimums.
Tour minimums, yes.
Tour minimums. As of right now, those tour minimums are waived, but it is up to the superintendent. So
could not.
Yeah, I mean, we have a new superintendent on board. There is nothing to say that those minimums could not return. There is nothing to say that the minimums might continue to be waived. It's really dependent upon an evaluation of what's going on, an evaluation of the Licensed Battlefield Guide program, the needs of the Park Service, and then whether or not we feel that we need to either have those or not have those.
Okay, now I got one more question for me, and then I'm going to go to some of the questions from the comments that are I deem worthy. Okay, I have said that I'm taking the exam to see how I do. And some people have said, well, that's not fair because then you're taking a spot for someone who wants to go all the way. And then I go, well, okay, you're right. Or are you? But I don't mean I'm going to take the exam and even if I get called on to the next level, I'm going to just say, no, I just wanted to see. I'll go as far as I go until I fail. That's my way of saying I don't really know how I'm going to do. Obviously, nobody does. But I don't really know if I could be confident in how I'll do. I don't even know if I would get that 43% that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying I guess what I'm saying when I do that is I'm saying I'm not getting my hopes up that I'm going to go all the way. I'm kind of curious to see how well I do. And if I do well, I'll go as far as I can until I pass or fail. So
we'll know you're number 43 right now.
Yeah, right.
That happens, Matt. That actually does happen in reality. There were individuals from 2017 who, I think were going into the exam with maybe the same type of thought process, or maybe they thought they were prepared, and then they opened the first page of the exam
and realized they weren't,
and did not return for the afternoon portion.
Really?
Now, one of the things, though, is, you have to complete the whole exam for it to count.
Okay.
If you leave, there's no reason to continue anything. But yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying I'm not trying to discourage anybody from taking it, but the reality is that there are going to be people that are going to sit for that exam who are not prepared, who think they may be, but who just aren't.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. So the same argument could be made for them. Well, they read 3 books, they should have known.
Yeah.
And that's, maybe they didn't.
So, but I guess my question is, let's say I wanted to just take it because there is no practice test out there. There's no way for me to gauge prior to when they give the exam if I should take the exam. So I have to take the exam, right? And let's say that's as far as I wanted to go. Am I taking a seat from someone else? Are we limited as to how many people we can fit in?
I can only speak to the past exams. At that point, I did not have a limit. Wait, how many people did you tell me?
250.
Okay. So, if according to Matt now we've got 250 people that are registering, I would have to rethink something, because it's not a matter of that I'm not okay with that number.
Right.
It's that physically in a seat, I have to be able to accommodate. I would have to be able to accommodate that number.
Right.
So,
could you do 2 test days?
We'd have to rearrange something and try and figure that out.
Yeah.
That's like a great problem to have, and then a bad problem to have.
Right.
I'm just going on past. I think we're going to be okay unless there's some sort of viral surge that you start creating. If
I start a viral surge and you guys benefit, I'm going to be pissed. Okay, let's see. Michael Pedersen says, if you pass the written but fail the oral, can you... we already got that one. Sorry there. Are there going to be choices for the essays? 2017 was due all 6, and I think you said you have one where you have to do it, and then...
I said it could be.
Oh, it could?
Like
Listen closely to the words.
Listen closely to the words.
That's my own advice that I'm giving to myself.
Read the questions carefully.
Yes, pay attention to everything. How many guides are you looking to license this time around? Ron wants to know.
We don't have a number.
Don't have a number yet. Right.
I will tell you, I would like to license as many as possible.
Okay.
It's obviously been a stretch in between exams, and we had COVID, and that did a number.
How many people since 2017 either passed away or retired from guiding?
Ooh, I don't know. I can tell you that we're down in like the 130s.
Okay, and was 150 before?
It was like 147.
Okay. So it's not
terrible.
A ton. Yeah.
But at this time, though, we do need to have the exam.
Do you think that, again, going back to my point about social media changing everything, do you think that there is a need for more guides because people are discovering individual guides through things like Jim and Eric's show or this show or, various other social media platforms?
Sure. And, it's not just that either. It's as guides, continue on. They have a life of their own, too. This job is, they're not an employee.
Right.
They decide when they're going to guide, when they're not going to guide. And, there are things that have changed tremendously over the past 20 plus years in that the volume of bus groups has changed. There are weekends in October that rival the anniversary.
Yeah.
As far as volume and visitation.
I think every weekend in October does. It's crazy. Yeah.
And so the opportunities, to the number of guides, it's there. It's definitely there. So yes, you've got social media platforms that are going to encourage people to maybe pursue licensed guides. You have individuals who provide tours, who then those clients or visitors tell their other friends. So word of mouth is something great. You have, various entities within the town that utilize the licensed battlefield guides in different shapes, forms, and fashions. So, the opportunity is there, definitely, to be able to do a number of different things.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I may have missed it, but how frequently are these exams offered?
As needed, as the Park Service needs.
Okay, so Ron says, I'm going to give it a try just because I've always wanted to give it a try. Going to make them tell me no. We'll never know if I don't try.
And that's very true.
Yeah. Let's see. Are candidates allowed to use visual aids such as simple maps, photos, mini balls, etc. on the Tier 4 oral exam?
Yes.
Yes.
And they are tools. So the key to those is that you should not be reading me your tour off of said visual aid. The visual aid is there to complement the tour that is already fashioned and created.
Right. Okay. Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit here, but he has a little more specific. He says, Good afternoon, Matt and Angela. Could you please discuss how technology is impacting the... Stop commenting, people. I'm losing my thing here. Where did I leave it now here? Oh, I lost it. Where is it? Good. Okay, here we go. Could you discuss how technology is impacting the visitor's experience today and the impact this may have on the future of guiding at Gettysburg National Military Park? So I don't know what he's specifically thinking about there, but we kind of talked about how podcasting is and social media in general are ways for people to learn about specific guides and want to request them and everything like that. But what about incorporating technology? Somebody had just asked about maps and things like that, and that's such an old-fashioned, little piece of paper. But what about I don't know why couldn't they bring a tablet along or something like that?
Sure. There's nothing to say that one could not bring out an iPad, tablet, whatever, and go on to some website, let's say Stone Sentinels, and blow up a monument because you can't quite get to it from where you are.
Right.
And you want to show it to them, and it's got some information on it. The other, the counter to that is, we've done some programs on the field utilizing technology, and when the signal fails, it's a paperweight.
Yeah.
I mean, you're carrying it in your haversack and it's dead weight, and the shoulders would have chucked it and, gone on the march. They very quickly figured out what was lean and what could get them to where they were going.
Yeah.
So technology is a benefit and a curse. I mean, it's great when it works. It becomes clunky when it doesn't. And so it's a marriage of those. If it doesn't work, if you're relying on it solely and it doesn't work, how does that come across to your visitors? Mm-hmm. Does it look like you're unprepared? Does it look like you don't have the correct components? You kind of have that appearance. But at some point, though, there is going to be an interesting reckoning between how many people are solely digital, and that's where they live.
Right.
And then where does that human interaction, that conversation, and, will we, swing the pendulum from one to the other where it was all digital, and then all of a sudden, as many things are, it comes back around to, oh my gosh, there's a person out there actually speaking.
Yeah.
That's so,
It's so weird.
Look at this.
So Ronald says, Ron, I think Ron, you were one of the people that don't like me taking it just to see. But he says, can the NPS ask candidates if they are going for a license or not to avoid this? So I'm going to guess the answer is no, because then that would open you guys up to accusations of bias or some kind of chicanery, because we said, well, I don't really want a license, I just want to see. And it's like, okay.
Exactly. I mean, if, once the registration process is live, and, that will be coming, not right now.
Do you have a date for that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
When is Little Round Top opening?
The two most asked questions at the information desk.
What are you going to do about the beavers? When is Little Round Top opening?
All right, 3.
When can we register for the exam?
I just spent 2 hours there and got all of those questions. No, I don't want to know anything about you, really. Prior to getting into the examination process, you can have every reason under the sun to sign up for the licensed battlefield guide exam. I just need to know that you've signed up, that you've paid the fee, and that I have an exam prepared for you, being that tier 1 is that first level. Mm-hmm. And that I know how many people I'm expecting, for that day. And I know not everyone's going to show up.
Well, of course.
I know.
Life gets in the way.
Exactly.
Dennis says, I've seen a surge so far this season in attendance at the park. Is the park forecasting for a larger post-COVID increase and forecasting a greater need for guides?
I mean, I can't predict,
right.
Why people, I can tell you that many historical and cultural sites have seen a decline in visitation even before COVID. Mm-hmm. And so it was a slow decline. So it wasn't really, and then COVID hit and things kind of like bottomed out for a number of entities. But no way to predict that. I mean, as far as guides, though, I can tell you, I've been in the position since, so it's been 10 years now. That time flew. But... we're all 10 years older.
Yeah.
And as we get 10 years older, and then we're another 10 years older, and we're going to decide that maybe, as a licensed guide, I don't want to be in the front of a bus anymore, taking those hard turns or, a quick stop and now I'm, potentially down in the stairwell. I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm done with that. So there's always a need for more guides, because there is kind of, I'll kindly say replacement. I'm not trying to replace anybody, but those that do retire, and those that
everybody slows down.
Yeah, those that reduce because they've moved to Myrtle Beach. Will always be.
Could you explain the expectations around availability during the different seasons of the year? So, are you doing the full-time, part-time, weekend thing this time around, or how's that all working? I know COVID, a lot of things like the tour minimums were postponed or paused or whatever. So what is the deal with that?
So, the way the program is currently operating is that we have a full-time license, a part-time license, and a weekend license. Okay. And I'm somewhat self-explanatory. Full-time, you're available in theory the whole year. Part-time, part of the year. Weekends, the weekends.
So when you say full-time and you just said the whole year, So it's not, is it necessarily like a 40-hour work week, or is it what you make of it?
It's what you make of it. So they are licensees. Guides are licensees of the park. They are going to create their own schedule. They're going to create their own availability. And again, whatever entity they're working with or through, even if they're doing it on their own, which we call a self-book, they are going to determine, I'm available this week and I'm available for 3 days. And I'm available for those 3 days, 8 to 5. Or I'm only going to do the afternoons of this week because I've got my other volunteer job, in the morning. There's nothing that mandates that they are there on a particular day. What the license does is it simply says you may guide during this season.
Okay.
So full time, you may guide the entire year. Part time, you may guide between, I think it's like April and October, or March and October. And weekend. Now, there's some special parameters. Hey, federal holiday, yeah, you can come in. Weekend guides.
What if you had like, what if I lived in Virginia, let's say, and I have a license, but I'm seasonal. I'm not. I can't do it in the winter.
Sure.
Okay. And I don't know. I have a family members from Texas coming up, and they say, "Oh, you take us around Gettysburg and everything like that." Now, of course, my family, I wouldn't charge them. But let's say for whatever reason they insisted because, this is what I do. Am I allowed to that one off there? And it's not a holiday, but it's like, it's my
So we have this great bullet point on the license that says, or at the discretion of the licensed battlefield guide program manager.
Oh, okay.
So
hey, Angie.
Bingo.
Okay.
And I have guides that do this. I have individuals who are weekend guides, but they do maybe a special type program for X or for Y, and that entity can only come in February. And that's not normally their time to be guiding. It's a quick email. It's hey, as long as you're not abusing said privilege, we're good to go.
Right.
Because again, in the long run, we're providing a service to those visitors.
And if they were to do it for someone in that situation, but for free and not charge them, they don't need to check in with you.
Then they're just a regular visitor.
Because they're not going to be in uniform.
Right.
They're just going to be, okay.
Exactly.
All right, let's see. Anything else there? Because you've explained it, but do you have any advice on liability and insurances while guiding? This is a great question, and this came up yesterday with Ralph and Jesse, and I asked this question, and they both were like, what? No, they weren't that. They did have an answer for that, but I'm surprised though that there isn't a standard advice or just now that you're an independent contractor, here's what this means. And you might want to get an LLC to protect your assets. You might want to get liability insurance, and here's this insurance you could add onto your auto insurance. And is there anything like that they get when they become a guide? So
in the eyes of the Park Service, they are a licensee.
Right.
That is what it says in the Code of Federal Regulations.
Right.
As far as, so that's what they are. As far as what the guides do individually, that is up to them.
That's, so they'd have to
So here's one way they can, here's a way, if anyone was concerned about that they can, be within regs, okay, and maybe alleviate that concern a little bit. There's nothing that says a guide must drive a visitor's car. They will offer their services as a guide. And so the owner or operator or person in control of that vehicle, the guides will ask permission. And so that individual is allowing them to do so. If a guide did not feel comfortable for whatever reason to drive, and some have refused to drive vehicles of a very high price tag style, or if they're unfamiliar with that type of vehicle, I don't think they want to jump behind a motorhome wheel, necessarily. They don't have to do that. So they can opt. I'll be in the passenger seat. Fine. Right. I'm going to give my tour.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says they must drive a vehicle. So I think to that, any additional coverage, it's just like being at home. If you want any additional coverage, and I'm probably walking out of my lane here, but you research it yourself and you opt in to whatever it is you feel is going to best protect you. the guides, can do much the same.
So there's, are they in any way indemnified under the park? I know they're not employees, but they're licensed by the park to do business. So are they in any way protected against a lawsuit or something from by the Park Service?
That's something that I'd have to double check on.
Okay. And these are just things I'm thinking of off the top of my head. The only reason I ask is because you know how litigious everybody is now, right? And the slightest little thing happens and they go after everybody. If you just happen to look at the incident, they go, I'm suing you too. And then,
Yeah.
So
that's definitely in a sphere that I don't operate in.
Yeah.
So that'd be a question for a completely different.
I'm thinking there has to be an answer that has been answered long ago. And the answer is don't worry about it for whatever reason. And because I know that there is this extra insurance they can get, but not everybody has it.
Yeah, and I think that answers the question right there. It's not don't worry about it. It's be aware of all the different options, and then you, as a licensed battlefield guide, are selecting the option that best fits what you feel is going to help as you're a licensed battlefield guide.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions there. I think I've asked all the questions I have. Angie, thank you very much for coming on and doing this. I hope this helps everybody. It helped me a lot understand this. And I think, that we got it from the source and not from 68 hands away or whatever.
There you
go. It's very helpful. And I hope you weren't nervous. You did great.
No, it's cool.
Okay, good. Because, some people are like, oh, I don't know how to do it. But you did a fantastic job. And maybe, I don't know if you think this would be helpful, but maybe a month or two out from the exam, we can have you on again to maybe reiterate some of this stuff. And maybe if you have any updates or something like that you want to share with everybody. Okay, cool. All right. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope this did help you. And if it didn't help you, well, what am I going to do? And also, anything I said, don't take to heart because I'm not a licensed guide. So I'm just guessing, and I glean a lot of stuff from what licensed guides actually tell me. So that's all there. So everything Angie said, listen to. Me, I'm just trying to move the show along. So that's it. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.